Today, we're going to talk about a man who lived this incredible double life, a physicist by trade and one of modern India's greatest poets by what he called, well, a compulsion. This is the fascinating story of Jayanta Mahapatra.
So, this is the man himself, Jayanta Mahapatra. He was born and raised in Cuttack, in Odisha, and his poetry is just so deeply tied to the land, the myths, and the struggles of his home. For years, he was a physics teacher, but deep down, another kind of hunger was growing inside him, one that science couldn't quite satisfy. But poetry, well, poetry could.
You know, the way he talked about poetry is so striking. For him, it wasn't some kind of gentle hobby or a simple choice. No, he said it became a need. It was like a trap that held me, like a mysterious disease. It was this powerful, undeniable force that just took hold of him and absolutely never let go.
Now, to really understand the ache that's right at the heart of his work, we have to go back in time. Because the central conflict of his life, this cleft identity, as we call it, wasn't really his own to begin with. It was an inheritance, something passed down from his grandfather.
Everything, and I mean everything, hinges on a decision made by this man, Jayanta Mahapatra. And it was a decision born not out of faith, but out of pure desperation. It was an act of survival that would create this deep spiritual fracture, a wound that his grandson, the poet, would spend his entire life trying to heal through his words.
So let's just try to picture this. We're talking about the Great Odisha Famine of 1866. This was a catastrophe on an almost unimaginable scale. Over 1 million people died, a third of the entire population, gone. And in the middle of all this, a starving orphan teenager named Chintamani, faced with certain death, walked 20 miles to a relief kitchen run by Christian missionaries. He ate and he survived. And to do that, he converted. He became a Christian, breaking away from his community, his history, everything.
And this right here, this brings us to the question that would haunt the poet his entire life. Could one single act, a change of religion made just to survive, could that sever a person's connection to their land, their history, their very ancestors? His poetry became this relentless, lifelong search for an answer.
So you have this deep internal conflict. How does that actually show up in his writing? Well, he expressed this feeling of being caught between two worlds through incredibly powerful symbols. And maybe no symbol was more central to him than the rain of his homeland, Odisha.
For Mahapatra, rain was never, ever just water falling from the sky. Think of it more like a mirror. It reflected the endless cycle of suffering, the hope for new life, the heavy weight of memory, and the constant, shifting weather of his own mind. It was the sound of his soul, completely drenched in the past.
And just like his own identity, this rain had two completely different faces. On the one hand, it could be this creative, purifying force, a rain of rights that brings wisdom and washes things clean. But on the other hand, it could be destructive, a useless rain that brings nothing but decay and a reminder of loss. It was both a blessing and a curse, all at once. But Mahapatra wasn't just looking inward, not at all. His poetry was also a fierce and unflinching witness to the world right outside his window, to the harsh realities of poverty and the suffering he saw in the lives of his people every single day. And he really forces us to ask a tough question, right? What is the role of art when there's so much pain in the world? Can a poem look directly at the ugliest parts of being human without turning away? He answers that question with a raw, unforgettable poem that was actually based on something that really happened. His famous poem, Hunger, is it's absolutely gut-wrenching. It tells the story of a poor fisherman who, to feed his family, just casually offers his own young daughter to the narrator. The poem isn't just about physical starvation. It's about the hunger for dignity, for meaning, that deep emotional emptiness. It's about how poverty can twist and brutalize the most sacred human bonds. So, when you look back, what's the lasting impact of this quiet physicist from Cuttack? Well, his legacy is a complex one. It's built not just on awards, but on his deep, lifelong quest to forge a relationship with his own fractured past. And his voice was so unique that people really took notice. In 1981, he did something nobody had ever done before. He became the very first poet to win the prestigious Sahitya Akademi Award. That's India's highest literary honor for a work written in English. This was a huge moment, and later he also received the Padma Shri. But his legacy isn't just about the awards he won, it's also about the one he gave back. In 2015, in this incredibly powerful act of protest against what he saw as a rising tide of intolerance in the country, he returned his Padma Shri. You see, his poetry was a witness to suffering, and in the end, so is his life. Maybe his entire life's work can be summed up by the title of his magnum opus, his great epic poem, Relationship. This poem is his ultimate attempt to connect all the dots, to understand his own place in the flow of time, his unbreakable bond with the soil of Odisha, and his connection to all the generations that came before and would come after him.
And that really brings us to the heart of it all. By wrestling so honestly with his own inherited wound, with his own cleft identity, Jayanta Mahapatra did so much more than just write beautiful poems. He gave a voice to the complex, layered, and often contradictory soul of modern India itself, a nation that is forever negotiating its relationship with its own ancient and turbulent past.